Debt ceiling negotiators met again Wednesday with just about a week to go until the Treasury's default deadline. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said the two sides are, quote, still far apart. Secretary Janet Yellen says markets for Treasuries are already showing signs of stress. CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion joins me now. Nikole, are we any closer to a deal than 24 hours ago when you and I last spoke?
Well, the speaker says that he feels that there is some progress being made and that things seem to be going a little bit better. We know that White House and congressional Republican negotiators met for a number of hours at the White House earlier today. In fact, one of those negotiators is back here at the Capitol, but the speaker did stop short of saying that there's any type of deal or agreement in place. And he said that there are a number of issues that they are still working through. So at this point, we expect the House to recess starting tomorrow, although the Speaker and Republican leadership has warned that members could be called back at a moment's notice if a deal is reached.
The negotiations are shaped by both leaders' recognition that they then have to, whatever they negotiate, they still have to sell it to their sides. So let's talk about that. Let's start with Speaker McCarthy. Florida Republican Matt Gaetz, who held up McCarthy's nomination as Speaker, was quoted in the New York Times saying, "The one-person motion to vacate has given us the very best version of Speaker McCarthy." Remind us what he's talking about and why that matters in these negotiations.
Well, why it matters is because, of course, with this motion to vacate, any one member could force a vote of no confidence against the Speaker. And so certainly it's possible if the Speaker comes back with some type of deal that's not amenable to some of his members, that could potentially cause this motion to vacate. Now, we don't see any indication of that potentially happening, but it does explain why the Speaker has really been towing the line of his conference in terms of fully endorsing this Republican-backed bill that passed, their debt limit bill that would increase the debt limit, cut spending. You know, the Speaker really hasn't budged off of that bill. We know the White House is not going to swallow that in full, but that is what a number of his members have been calling for, that they're not going to accept anything less. And so, at least publicly, that the Speaker has maintained that position. So, in essence, kind of what Gaetz is saying is that, you know, they are kind of getting what they want in the sense that the Speaker is not bowing to the White House, which was certainly a concern that some members had, including Gaetz, during that contentious Speaker fight. But the reality is that ultimately, to cut a deal, the Speaker is going to have to give somewhere, because any deal will likely need some bipartisan support.
So on the Democratic side of the aisle, progressives have said they won't vote for a bill that, in their view, hurts working people. How much of a problem is that for President Biden?
Well, many progressives have made clear that, you know, they don't want the president to concede too much either. And especially when it comes to, for instance, this issue of work requirements that has become kind of a sticking point in some of the negotiations. You know, that is something that many progressives have made clear that they're not going to support anything that ultimately hurts poor people, anything that support, you know, hurts those that, you know, the Democratic Party supports and programs that they support. Social safety net programs and the like. So that is a point of contention. But the reality is, in talking to the leaders of the Problem Solvers Caucus, you know, they acknowledge that there does have to be give and take, and that ultimately, you know, you are going to lose members on both sides of the aisle in order to reach an agreement. Take a listen.
We're going to need Democrats, not just Republicans in the end, and not 5 Democrats. I think you probably need a sizable number of Democrats to make this happen.
Every member's got their district-specific issues that could be a deal killer for them. So it's hard to prognosticate without seeing what they actually come to an agreement on, but that's precisely why it's so hard.
And so that is the reality. So whether it's members to the far right in terms of the Republican conference or more progressive members on the Democratic side of the aisle, I mean, it's certainly possible that you could have those extreme wings not necessarily back this bill ultimately, which is why they're going to have to find consensus in the middle. And as you heard Congressman Gottheimer say, you know, it is going to be a heavy lift for Democrats, that they're going to need a substantial amount of Democratic support. The Speaker has said he feels that the majority of his conference will ultimately back whatever deal ultimately emerges. But again, there are such slim margins on both sides, so every vote is really going to matter here.
As much discussion as there's been about the spending numbers, the toughest number may be getting to 218, what's needed for the vote. Nikole Killion on Capitol Hill. Thanks a lot, Nikole.
You bet.